I pretended to be broke during my divorce while building a business empire in my maiden name. The whole thing started when I found those messages on his phone 3 years ago. My husband of 12 years was having an affair with someone from his office, and apparently it had been going on for months. The betrayal hit me like a truck, but what really made my blood boil was reading how they laughed about me being a stay-at-home mom who couldn't survive without him. I spent exactly one night crying into my pillow, then I got angry. Really angry. The kind of anger that makes you want to prove everyone wrong in the most spectacular way possible. He thought I was helpless, dependent, just another housewife who would crumble without his paycheck. Boy, was he wrong. The next morning, I started planning. I had always been good with numbers and had helped several friends with their small business ideas over the years. Before marriage, I had worked in finance for 5 years and still remembered everything. My brain was sharp, I just hadn't been using it for anything beyond grocery lists and school pickup schedules. I decided to file for divorce, but I wasn't going to make it easy for him. If he wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. I started documenting everything: his income, our assets, his spending habits. But more importantly, I started building something he would never see coming. The first step was getting my maiden name back legally. I told him it was for emotional healing, to reclaim my identity after the betrayal. He actually seemed relieved, probably thought it would make the divorce easier. What he didn't know was that I was already using that name to set up business accounts. I started small, really small. I had about $3,000 saved from birthday money and small cash gifts over the years that I had hidden in an old jewelry box. My mom had always told me to keep some money he didn't know about, and for the first time in my life, I was grateful for her paranoia. The business began in our garage. I started buying items from estate sales and garage sales, then reselling them online. I had a good eye for valuable pieces that people didn't recognize. Within 2 months, I had turned that 3,000 into 8,000. The adrenaline rush was incredible. But I had to be careful. I couldn't let him see any money coming in, so I opened a business account at a bank across town under my maiden name. I would drive there during the day while he was at work, making deposits and handling business. To him, I was just a depressed housewife who spent her days shopping and moping around the house. The divorce proceedings started, and his lawyer was confident this would be straightforward. I played my part perfectly, the devastated wife who couldn't even balance a checkbook. I wore my oldest clothes to court, drove our beat-up second car, and constantly worried about money in front of him. I even asked him to help me understand the financial paperwork, because numbers were so confusing to me. Meanwhile, my business was exploding. I had expanded from reselling to actually sourcing products directly from manufacturers. I discovered a gap in the market for eco-friendly home organization products. Within 6 months, I was making more in a month than he made in 3. But nobody knew except my accountant, who I paid very well to keep quiet. The hardest part was watching him get more and more confident about the divorce settlement. He thought he was going to give me some alimony, maybe half of our small savings, and that would be it. His affair partner had moved in with him temporarily, and I could see them through the window sometimes, probably planning their future with what they thought was his secure financial situation. I kept playing poor. I started shopping at thrift stores and actually found some amazing pieces there. I would show him my purchases and complain about how expensive everything was getting. I even asked him for extra money for groceries a few times, which he gave me while rolling his eyes. That money went straight into my business account. The real breakthrough came when I landed a contract with a major retailer. They wanted to carry my organization products nationwide. The contract was worth more than his annual salary, but I had to be strategic about how I handled it. I set up the manufacturing through a partner company and kept my name completely separate from the public-facing business. By the time we were finalizing the divorce, I owned a company that was pulling in serious revenue. I had employees, warehouse space, and was in talks with 3 more major retailers. But according to the divorce papers, I was just a broke housewife who could barely support herself. The day we signed the final papers, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. He was so smug, thinking he had gotten away with cheating and would only have to pay minimal alimony. His lawyer had argued that since I had no work experience and no assets, I would need support to get back on my feet. I waited exactly 1 week after the divorce was finalized before I made my first public move. I had been invited to speak at a business conference about successful women entrepreneurs. I accepted, and the local newspaper wanted to do a feature story about my company. The article came out on a Tuesday morning. My phone started ringing within an hour. It was him, screaming about how I had lied and cheated him out of money. I let him rant for about 30 seconds before I hung up. Then I blocked his number. His lawyer called next, threatening to take me back to court for hiding assets. I had my lawyer ready for this. Everything I had done was completely legal. I had built the business after filing for divorce, using money that was legally mine. I had never lied under oath about any existing assets because the business hadn't existed when we filled out those forms. The newspaper article went viral locally. I was suddenly the woman who had outsmarted her cheating husband and built a business empire while he thought she was helpless. The story got picked up by a few bigger outlets, and suddenly I was getting interview requests from business magazines. But the real twist came about a month later. I was at a networking event when I overheard two women talking about a company that was trying to poach employees from my business. They were offering double salaries and targeting my key people. I listened closer and realized they were talking about his company. He was trying to sabotage my business by stealing my employees. But he had made a crucial mistake. He didn't realize that my employees were incredibly loyal. Instead of jumping ship, they came to me with the offers. We used them to our advantage, documenting everything and building a case for corporate espionage. The legal battle that followed was intense. His company ended up facing serious consequences for their unethical practices. But the really beautiful part was that during the investigation, it came out that he had been embezzling from his own company to fund his affair. The expensive dinners, the weekend trips, the jewelry, it was all stolen money. He lost his position, faced criminal charges, and his affair partner left him the moment things got complicated. I watched it all unfold from my new office, in a building I had purchased with my business profits. The business kept growing. Within 2 years, I had expanded into 3 different product lines and was shipping internationally. I appeared on several business shows and was invited to speak at conferences around the country. I had gone from being a housewife who couldn't balance a checkbook to running a multi-million-dollar company. But success brought its own challenges. I started getting attention from men who were interested in my money rather than me. I had to learn to navigate business relationships where people might have ulterior motives. Trust became a luxury I couldn't afford easily. The hardest part was explaining everything to our kids. They were old enough to understand that their father had made mistakes, but young enough to still love him despite everything. I never wanted them to feel like they had to choose sides, but I also couldn't pretend that what he did was acceptable. I decided to use my success to help other women in similar situations. I started a foundation that provides business loans and mentorship to women going through divorces. The applications I received were heartbreaking. So many women who had been made to feel helpless and dependent, just like I had been. One of my first loan recipients was a woman whose husband had hidden assets during their divorce. She had always been interested in photography, but had never pursued it seriously. With the loan, she started a photography business, and within a year was booking weddings every weekend. Seeing her success reminded me why I had started the foundation. My ex-husband tried to reconcile about 3 years after the divorce. He had served some time for the embezzlement, lost his career, and was working at a much lower-level position. He showed up at my office one day, looking nothing like the confident man who had thought he was getting away with cheating. He apologized for everything and asked if we could try again. He said he had made terrible mistakes and realized what he had lost. But what really bothered me was that he kept talking about my money and my success. Even his apology was partly about wanting back into the comfortable life he thought I could provide. I told him no, obviously. But I also told him that I hoped he could find a way to be a better father to our kids and a better person in general. I didn't want to hold on to anger forever, but I also wasn't going to forget the lessons I had learned. The business continued to evolve. I started acquiring smaller companies and helping them grow. I discovered that I had a talent for seeing potential in businesses that others overlooked. It was like my years of finding treasures at garage sales had prepared me for finding undervalued companies. One of my acquisitions was particularly meaningful. It was a small company run by a woman who had started it after her own divorce. She was struggling to compete with bigger players in the market, but her products were innovative and high quality. After we acquired her company, she became one of my vice presidents, and we doubled her revenue within 18 months. I also started dating again, which was terrifying and exciting at the same time. I had been out of the dating scene for so long, and now I was in a completely different position than I had been before. I wasn't looking for someone to support me financially. I needed someone who could handle being with a successful woman. The first few relationships were disasters. One guy was clearly intimidated by my success and kept trying to minimize it. Another was obviously interested in my money and kept suggesting expensive trips and purchases. I started to wonder if I would ever find someone who was interested in me as a person rather than as a bank account. But then I met someone at a book club of all places. He was a teacher, down to earth, and had no idea about my business success when we first started talking. We connected over books and shared values, and he was genuinely surprised when he found out about my company. His reaction was to be proud of me, not intimidated or greedy. We took things slowly, partly because I was cautious and partly because I wanted to make sure he was genuine. He never asked me to pay for expensive dates or made comments about my money. He supported my foundation work and was interested in my business from a genuine curiosity standpoint, not because he wanted to benefit from it. The kids loved him too, which was crucial. They had been through enough upheaval, and I wasn't going to bring someone into their lives who wasn't completely committed to being a positive influence. He came to their school events, helped with homework, and never tried to replace their father, just supported them as they navigated their relationship with their dad. My business hit a major milestone when we went public. The IPO was oversubscribed, and suddenly I was worth more than I had ever imagined possible. The local newspaper that had first written about me did a follow-up story about the girl who had started selling garage sale finds and was now running a publicly traded company. But the real validation came from other women who reached out to me. I received hundreds of messages from women who said my story had inspired them to start their own businesses or leave unhealthy relationships. Many of them shared their own stories of financial abuse or being made to feel helpless by their partners. I realized that my experience, as painful as it had given me a platform to help others. I started speaking more publicly about financial independence for women and the importance of having your own money and career, even in a happy marriage. I wish someone had told me these things when I was younger. The foundation grew too. We started offering not just loans, but also business education classes and mentorship programs. I partnered with several business schools to create scholarships for women who were starting over after divorce or major life changes. The impact was measurable. We were helping hundreds of women become financially independent every year. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had just accepted the divorce settlement and moved on with my life. I probably would have struggled financially, maybe eventually found a job, and slowly rebuilt. Instead, I had used my anger and determination to create something bigger than I had ever imagined. The anger had faded over the years, replaced by gratitude for the experience that had pushed me to discover capabilities I didn't know I had. I wouldn't recommend the path I took to anyone. It was risky and stressful and could have failed spectacularly. But it worked for me, and it taught me that I was capable of far more than I had ever believed. My kids were now teenagers, and they were proud of what I had built. They saw me as a strong, independent woman who had overcome challenges, and I hoped that would influence how they approached their own relationships and careers. They knew their father had made mistakes, but they also knew that people could change and grow from their experiences. The business continued to expand internationally. We opened offices in Canada and the UK, and I was traveling frequently to oversee operations. It was exhausting but exhilarating. I had built something that was bigger than just revenge against my ex-husband. I had created jobs, helped other women, and proven that it was possible to start over and build something meaningful. Sometimes I would drive past our old house, where he still lived with his new girlfriend. It was smaller than I remembered, and I felt nothing but mild curiosity about their lives. My life had become so much bigger and more fulfilling than what I had lost, and I was genuinely grateful for the journey that had brought me to where I was. The man I had been dating for 3 years proposed to me on a hiking trip. No expensive ring, no fancy restaurant, just the two of us on a mountain trail talking about our future together. He said he wanted to support my dreams and build a life together where we both could continue growing and helping others. I said yes. We planned a small wedding, focused on celebrating with the people who mattered most to us. My kids walked me down the aisle, and I felt like I was finally getting the partnership I had always wanted. Someone who saw me as an equal, who supported my ambitions, and who wasn't intimidated by my success. Looking back, I realized that pretending to be broke during my divorce had been just the beginning. It had given me the space and motivation to discover who I really was and what I was capable of achieving. The woman who had cried into her pillow 3 years ago felt like a different person entirely. The business empire I had built was successful beyond my wildest dreams, but more importantly, it had given me the confidence and financial independence to make choices based on what I wanted rather than what I needed. I had learned that the best revenge wasn't just success. It was becoming genuinely happy and fulfilled in a way that had nothing to do with anyone else. My story had become bigger than just outsmarting my ex-husband. It had become about transformation, resilience, and the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations on your potential. I had started by pretending to be broke, but I had ended up discovering that I was richer than I had ever imagined, not just financially, but in every way that mattered.